Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Kickin Aspergers. I'm your host, Tim. This is episode number 5. And this is going to be our very first Roach-free episode. Roach, the cat, decided that she wanted to go play somewhere else, so she is currently playing somewhere else for the time being. So we are not going to have a cameo appearance by that little furball I call Roach, also better known with the proper name of Nimbus. In this episode, I want to talk about becoming bored. Um, that's something that happens, and I don't think it's anything that we necessarily need to be worried about. But first, again, let me lay out the disclaimer. I am just here to talk about my opinions and how I have lived my life being diagnosed with Asperger's. I'm not a medical professional. I have no training in any sort of medicine or psychiatry, psychology, anything like that. So if you believe that you might have Asperger's or fall on the autism spectrum, I strongly encourage you to seek the professional assistance from a trained medical professional, whether that be a physician or a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whoever it may be. I am none of that. So anyway, something was brought up in one of my previous videos, and it's something that I thought I would go ahead and talk about this time. And that is it's about our interests and ultimately becoming bored over time. I've discussed in previous videos that one of the misdiagnoses that I had before I was properly, what I believe to be properly diagnosed with Asperger's, or falling on the autism spectrum, is ADD. And I don't think ADD is a very good diagnosis. I think it's something that a lot of people who fall on the spectrum are misdiagnosed with. And for me, I feel that I didn't have ADD, but instead I had hyper focus on certain things that I was interested in, and the rest of the stuff I just didn't care about, so I didn't pay any attention to that, and therefore it looked like I was there was a deficit in my attention to things that I should be paying attention to. In this particular case, I enjoy math and science and things like that. So, with that being said, over time I become hyper focused on certain things, and as a result of becoming hyper focused, I tend to get tired of them, get bored. I don't know if it's a sense that I feel that I have mastered that particular subject, or what exactly it is, or if it's just that I have a general thirst for knowledge, and that once I get enough about something, I move on to something else. So I believe Corey mentioned something about going off to college. What is it that you focus on? Truthfully, I don't think there's any one thing that you need to focus on. I think it's all about getting a well-rounded education. College is a great place to get an education, but it's not the only place that you can go to get an education. You can train yourself. There are a lot of online tools. Books are plentiful. I mean, Amazon and the internet have made it easy to acquire texts that will help you learn how to advance what it is you want to advance, whether that be learning about accounting, learning about engineering, learning about origami, or a foreign language, whatever. So, over time, I've had numerous interests. For instance, I used to be really big into astronomy. I've talked about how I used to have a telescope, and oftentimes I could be seen out on the back deck of my parents' house as I was a kid, staring up at the stars. Um, I do not have the same memory or the same familiarity with the celestial objects that are out there. I do know where a majority of the more major constellations are, but over time a lot of that stuff has faded. I also used to be really big into amateur or ham radio. And again, part of my attraction to that was, I'm not going to lie, I had a family member that said, hey, if you go get your ham radio license, I'll buy you your first radio. Age of 12, 13 years old, hey, someone giving you a $250 gift, that's pretty cool. Guess what? You go buy the book, you learn, you study, you pass your exam, boom, you get a radio. And honestly, the ham radio has allowed me to springboard into other activities that I have become interested in, such as meteorology, because with ham radio, there are a lot of storm chasers and storm spotters that are on the ham bands. But again, I used to be hyper focused on ham radio, much like I used to be hyper focused on astronomy, and being hyper focused on ham radio. I mean, I've got my general license. I learned Morse code and passed at the time. The exam that I had to take was 13 words per minute, so I knew Morse code at 13 words per minute. I am not very proficient in it today, but I'm usually able to pick it out. And then that goes on to some other things that I have had some interest in. A lot of autistic people have some artistic interests. For me, the one thing that was really artistic, well, I guess there were two things that I could do that were artistic. I used to play the trumpet when I was in band, and after leaving high school, I didn't go into band in college, and pretty much that went to the wayside. The other artistic thing that I used to do, and this was when I was much younger, was calligraphy. I cannot draw worth beans. It is very difficult for me to draw a stick figure. So, although sometimes I do draw something that actually looks somewhat reasonable, but for me, it was calligraphy, and I used to have a whole bunch of different calligraphy pens in every sort of color, and would do all this stuff. Again, I do absolutely none of that today. Don't ask me to write any calligraphy; it's not going to happen. Went off to college, where I studied meteorology. I have my bachelor's in meteorology with minors in mathematics and hydrological science. I still really enjoy math. Math is something that it will always be a part of me, much like meteorology will always be a part of me, just because we have weather every day. But I'm not nearly as hyper focused on meteorology and math as I used to be. I still use math every day. I still process numbers in my head. I've mentioned before, I run a transportation business, ground transportation, chauffeur transportation, limousine service. So I use my math that I know to figure out my rate structures and how much it costs me to operate my vehicles per mile, so on and so forth. So I do that very, very intense. Over time, I've picked up, other hobbies. I used to be big into video games. I've got bored of that. Even as they came out with new games, I got bored. Probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest expense items outside of going to school and getting a degree in meteorology is I know how to fly an airplane. And it's kind of funny. Once I got my pilot's license, gosh, how many years ago was that? Oh, it's been a few years. 4 years ago? Yeah, a little over, for about 4.5 years ago, I got my pilot's license. Maybe three and a half. Regardless, pretty much after I got my pilot's license, I stopped flying. I kind of felt like I had reached that certain level of proficiency, and I wanted to move on to something else. Have I really moved on to anything else? No. Really haven't. Doing the business, I focus a lot on marketing and trying to understand Facebook marketing and Google AdWords. That may actually be something that takes me a while because it's constantly changing and the goalposts are moving. Every time you think you have it figured out, the goalposts move. So, with that, over time, it's okay to become bored in the things that you're interested in. I think a lot of it is that a lot of us, we tend to be, it's the genius gene, right? And so we're constantly looking for new ways to fill our mind with new information and learn a little bit. It is kind of funny. There's always that saying that, I know little about everything and I'm like a master of nothing. Or so I forget what the exact saying is, but I do tend to enjoy learning just a little bit about everything. I feel like it makes me a more well-rounded person. With that being said, I do think there are certain ways to counter some of the boredom so that you don't get stuck in a rut. I think once you become bored, depression tends to set in, and I don't want depression to set in for any of us, because it can be a pretty brutal cycle. It has been a brutal cycle for me. There are certain things that I do in order to avoid going down that rabbit hole. So, most people that fall on the spectrum tend to prefer a very set schedule. I am in an industry where a set schedule is nearly impossible to have, at least at this point in my career. Maybe sometime having a set schedule will be something that I can look forward to, but right now, it's not a reality. Most people that are on the spectrum do have a more normal job where they have a set schedule. They work 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., whatever it happens to be. With that, you're able to take classes and enroll in other things, extracurricular activities that interest you. For instance, I live in Johnson County, Kansas. We have a phenomenal community college here that has all sorts of different classes that you can take. Some are offered during the evenings, some are offered during the weekends. And if I had a more set schedule where I could say, yes, I can be there every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. or at 7 p.m. or whatever the time happens to be, to learn how to cook using a wok, or learn how to code using Ruby on Rails, or learn how to become a better detective, how to read fingerprints, or how to, whatever it may be, how to become an accountant, even some of these basic courses that people have careers in. Um, I think with you having the more set schedule of that 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 or whatever job you have, that it allows you the opportunity to still learn. I think that is the easiest way to really combat boredom, is to continue learning. Don't get in a rut where you get bored, because like I said, I believe it leads to depression. With that being said, you know, I do think, again, don't worry if you get too bored, or if there's something that you are really focused on and you become bored, that's okay. Um, I will warn you, this has been a problem for me. Um, Much like I get bored with certain subjects, certain hobbies, admittedly, I tend to get bored with people. Um, and that concerns me. Um, and I don't know. There are friends that over time I've lost contact with. A lot of it is that we've moved. One of us has moved away from the other, whether that be me leaving college and moving back to Kansas City, or people that were in Kansas City moving to moving away, accepting jobs in other cities. Um, I've lost relationships, and in some cases, the relationships have become boring. Um, I'm really worried about that with my romantic relationships, and that I become bored. Not in any sort of sexual way or anything like that, but more in just as my interests fade and change over time, I'm afraid that the person that I'm with will not be able to change with me, and that we may grow apart. And that scares me a little bit. So, you know, it's effort that I need to put into um, my romantic relationships if I'm going to make them succeed. I honestly believe, if you look at Albert Einstein had many, many, many affairs. He did not stay with one woman very long. And quite honestly, I think it's because he became bored. Uh, there's a part of me that's afraid that I'm going to become uh, the adulterer, if you will, um, Not that I'm saying that's right or wrong, but someone who is unable to keep a relationship very long, that has to bounce from person to person to person just because they're bored. That is something that does concern me. And I just hope that I'm able to find someone that is going to constantly cause me to want to learn. So yeah, and at the same time, I'm not saying that all my friendships have gone away. I still talk to a friend that I've known from the 7th grade. He lives not too far away. I still talk to a friend that I've known since the 10th grade. He and his wife live in Lincoln, Nebraska, with their uh, 5 kids, 6 kids, five, five kids. I can't keep track of it anymore. Um, I just send them a couple family fun size things whenever I send them stuff. Um, but it is one of those things that I that is a big concern for me, is the boredom, not only with subjects, with the people that I have in my life. Um, so just constantly, I guess, try to push yourself and try to push that relationship, and develop that relationship into something that you guys can grow together. Whether that be your significant other, your boyfriend or girlfriend, or just your friend that you hang out with on the weekends. Um, Try to do things together and push each other and grow. And I think that will be something that will help rid you of that boredom, or reduce the risks of you becoming bored. So with that, I really appreciate you tuning into episode number 5 of Kickin Aspergers. Again, the first roach-free episode, and I look forward to talking to you all on episode number 6. Y'all have a great day, and thank you for tuning in. Oh, and if you like this video, please subscribe so you get notifications when I post another video, and share these videos. Again, I'm not here to do anything other than this is a venture for me to help people who have Asperger's realize that they are not alone, that there are other people like us, and maybe give some guidance and some tips on what has worked for me to get me out of my shell, as well as introduce coworkers, family members, brothers, siblings, teachers, classmates, friends, a little bit of insight into who we are, and be open and honest about what it's like to be me. And maybe if they can understand a little bit more about me, they can understand a little bit more about you. So thank you very much again for tuning in to episode number 5, and I will see you next time at episode number 6.